Hello, it's Helen. When my son married, I didn't mention I'd inherited my husband's ranch. Thank God I didn't, because if I had, I don't think I'd have 1 inch of it left now. It started with a knock on my door at 7:04 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was standing at the kitchen window, staring into my coffee, wondering if I should finally rip up the last of Jack's old flannel shirts, the ones still folded like ghosts in his side of the dresser. I hadn't worn them. I hadn't washed them. They still smelled like cedar and horses. That was the morning I almost let go. But instead, I got the knock. Fast. 2 short, 1 long. I froze. That was how Jack used to knock when he came in from the fields, teasing that he didn't want to spook the wife. No one else knocked like that, not the mailman, not the neighbor boys, not even my son. But it was my son on the porch, Ben, wearing a navy sports coat too clean for a Wednesday and smiling too wide for someone who never smiled that way, unless he was trying to sell me something. "Morning, Mom," he said, stepping in without waiting for me to say yes. "You got a minute?" I had more than a minute. I had an empty house and 15 acres of silence. Ben glanced around the kitchen like he hadn't grown up there, like it was a room in a stranger's bed and breakfast. His eyes lingered on Jack's hat still hanging on the hook. He didn't mention it. "Coffee?" I asked. "No, I'm good. Actually—" He paused. "Claire and I are thinking of moving out of the city." I nodded slowly. "We've been looking at some land," he went on, "but it's either overpriced or out in the boonies, and then I thought, Mom still has the ranch." I stiffened. "Still?" He smiled again, gentler this time, like I was one of his toddlers needing coaxing. "You know what I mean. It's a lot to keep up on your own. And Claire's been saying how great it would be to raise the kids with some space. Real roots, family history, you know." That last part, family history, caught in my chest, because Claire never once asked about Jack, never once came out to the ranch, not even when Ben did, and Ben hadn't visited in nearly a year. Now suddenly he wanted to raise their kids here, on this land, with me or without me, I wasn't sure. "Didn't realize you were looking to become ranchers," I said. "Oh, we're not," he laughed. "God, no, but we could lease out the fields, renovate the house, make it modern, maybe even Airbnb the old barn once it's cleaned out. People love rustic." He looked pleased with himself, like he'd solved a complicated equation. I stared at him, my son, my only child, the same boy who used to chase frogs down by the creek and cry when I made him leave them behind. This man sitting in my kitchen wasn't crying now. He was planning. "I haven't decided what to do with it yet," I said softly. He blinked. "You inherited it, right, when Dad passed?" "Yes." "And there's no debts or anything?" I took a breath. "Ben, what is this really about?" He hesitated, just for a second too long. Then he said, "Claire's brother is looking to invest in some land. He thinks this place could be something big." Ah, there it was. Not family history, not roots, a business opportunity. I felt the faintest ripple of something under my ribs, not quite anger, not quite grief, just the realization that something precious was shifting again, and I wasn't sure yet how to stop it. I looked at my son and realized if I'd told him about the ranch the day Jack died, I might have already lost it. He reached across the table and put his hand on mine. "Think about it, okay? We could make something really great here." I didn't answer. I just nodded. He stood, kissed my cheek, and walked out the door. Jack's old flannel still lay folded on the counter behind me. I picked it up, breathed it in. God help me, I wished I could talk to him right then, because something told me this wasn't going to be the end of it. It was just the start. The next morning, I went down to the south field and stood at the edge where the cottonwoods lean like old men whispering to each other. It was quiet, like always, except for the wind and the long breath of the earth waking up. I've stood in that same spot for more than 40 years, first with Jack, back when the ranch was more work than money, more dust than dreams. Then alone, just me and the sky and the horses. I watched a hawk circle over the ridge, and I thought about what Ben had said, Claire's brother, leasing the land, Airbnb, modern. You want to kill something around here, just say you're going to make it modern. Back in the house, I made a list. Not a real one, just a mental ledger of everything that might draw a person's eye. The cracked beams in the barn, the rust on the pump out back, the way the fence on the north side sags after every storm. To someone like Claire or her brother or anyone who didn't know the land, it probably looked like a forgotten place, a fixer-upper. But Jack and I didn't build this place for profit. We built it for love and grief, and the kind of life that doesn't need polishing to shine. When Jack died, I didn't talk much about the ranch. Not to Ben, not to anyone. It was in my name by then, always had been, technically. But Jack was the one who worked it, breathed it. I kept it going after, mostly out of habit, maybe out of loyalty. But I never once thought of letting it go. Until Ben came knocking with his easy smile and plans that didn't have room for what we built. That night, I sat with the deed in my lap. Heavy thing for a few pages. I hadn't told Ben or anyone that Jack left me full ownership with no strings. The ranch was mine, clean and clear, and it was worth more now than it had been in decades. A few months after Jack passed, a young fella came up from Austin asking if I'd ever considered selling. He waved a number at me that nearly knocked me off my feet, said the area was prime for development, that people were craving nature. I told him people craving nature should start with a walk outside. He didn't come back, but the number stuck in my mind. I looked at it again now. I still had the paperwork buried in the same drawer as Jack's old life insurance policy. That land, this ranch, wasn't just valuable. It was gold. And if I told Ben that, he'd come running, not with a picnic and grandkids, with contracts. Claire would come too, and her brother, maybe even lawyers. And once they smelled the money in the soil, they'd never see the roots. The next time Ben called, he was chirpier than ever. "Mom, great news. Claire's brother wants to come see the place. He's thinking we could set up a family LLC, you know, make it official. You'd still be part of it, of course." "Part of it," I repeated. "Yeah, I mean, you'd still be living there. But we could take over the hard stuff. You deserve a break." A break. I stared at the phone for a second. "Ben," I said carefully, "this isn't just land. This is your father's soul stitched into the ground." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Mom, I get it. Really, I do. But times change. Yes, they do. And sometimes they don't change for the better." After we hung up, I called my lawyer, not to sell, but to seal. There were ways to protect land like mine. I didn't know all the details, but I wanted to make sure that even if I dropped dead tomorrow, Ben couldn't sell the ranch to the highest bidder the next day. Not unless he truly earned it. And that's when I decided something. If Ben wanted the ranch, he was going to have to come back and see what it really was. Not a plot of dirt for Claire's Instagram, not a cash cow for her brother, but the last real thing in our family, and God help him if he wanted to take it. He'd better be ready to look me in the eye and fight for it. I didn't invite Ben out right away. Instead, I waited. I kept the land quiet and the gate locked, let the silence do its work. The kind of silence that hangs thick in your chest and makes you ask yourself why you're really chasing something. I figured if he really wanted the ranch, he'd have to feel that silence, stand in it, and decide whether he loved it or just wanted to use it. It took 2 weeks before he called again. "Hey, Mom, Claire and I are going to drive out Sunday. Thought we'd bring the kids, show them where Daddy used to catch grasshoppers." He laughed like it was a sweet memory. It was mine, not his. "All right," I said, "I'll make cobbler." They arrived just after noon, their big SUV kicking up dust like a storm front. Claire stepped out in spotless white sneakers, sunglasses bigger than sense, and that tight smile she always wore when she came to my house, like she was holding her breath. The kids came tumbling out next, twin little whirlwinds in matching denim and plastic cowboy hats. I smiled despite myself. Ben followed, phone in hand, already taking pictures. He didn't look at the barn, didn't touch the fence posts, just looked at the light, the angles, the vibe. I watched him try to frame my life through a phone screen, and my heart sank. Claire sniffed the air like it might carry disease. "It smells like grass," she said. "It's a ranch," I reminded her. "That's the perfume." Ben laughed nervously and put a hand on my back. "Come on, let's show the kids the creek." We walked past the house, the barn, the old chicken coop Jack built with his bare hands. The kids ran ahead, screaming and happy. Claire trailed behind, tapping her phone, probably texting her brother. At the edge of the creek, Ben stopped. "I used to sit right there," he said, pointing to the flat stone where Jack taught him how to skip rocks. I nodded. "You cried the first time you caught a crawdad." He grinned, and for a flicker of a second, he looked like my boy again. Then the moment passed. "So," he said, "Claire's brother has some ideas. Environmentally sensitive development. Solar-powered cabins. Nothing major, just enough to bring in a little income. You'd still have your space, of course." My space. I looked at the water. It was low this year, whispering instead of gurgling, but it was still alive, just like this land. "Ben," I said, "have you ever spent a night here? Since your father passed?" He blinked. "Well, no, not since then." "Have you walked the fence lines? Tended the pasture? Buried a calf?" "No, but do you know the name of the mare in the back field?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "Mom." I turned to him. "You want to build cabins here, Ben? Sell authentic experiences? You can't sell what you don't understand." His face hardened. "Claire's brother says we'd be stupid not to take advantage of what we've got." "What you've got?" He shifted. "What we could have, Mom. Together." And there it was, the split between us, wide as the canyon down by the West Ridge. He didn't see this place, not really. He saw potential, a portfolio, a project. I saw Jack. I saw the night we danced in the barn during a thunderstorm, the mud on my dress, the way he kissed me with hay in his hair. I saw the first time Ben took his first steps on the porch, the time he broke his arm trying to ride a fence rail like a horse. I saw roots. Ben saw revenue. That night, they stayed in town. "Better for the kids," Claire said, wrinkling her nose at the guest room. I watched their taillights fade down the road, and then I went inside. I pulled out the old ledger Jack used to keep, a handwritten history of the land, its animals, its repairs, its seasons. On the last page, written in his tight, practical scrawl, was one sentence: "Only give it to someone who'll love it like I did." I closed the book with a hand that didn't tremble. Ben wasn't ready, but I was. I was ready to protect this place, even from my own blood. Because sometimes love means saying no, even when it breaks you in half. I woke up before sunrise the next day, not because I wanted to, but because that old, familiar ache in my chest had crept in, the one that always came when something was about to be lost. Jack used to say I had the weather in my bones, but this wasn't a storm rolling in from the west. This was something quieter, colder, the slow erosion of trust. I stood in the doorway of the barn, wrapped in one of Jack's old jackets, and listened to the wind as it scraped through the eaves. The horses stirred, soft nickers and shifting hooves. They knew the world was changing. Animals always know before we do. Ben texted me around 9 a.m. Mom, we want to meet with you this afternoon. Bring the deed? No, how are you? No, did you sleep well? Just bring the deed. I didn't answer. Instead, I called Reggie, our neighbor from 2 properties over, the closest thing I had to a friend in this town anymore. He was in his 80s, stubborn as a mule, and still baling his own hay. You busy? I asked. Always, he grumbled. What do you need? Your presence and your good sense. That all? He chuckled. Should I bring my shotgun too? I laughed, even though I wasn't sure it was a joke. They showed up right on time. Claire wore heels, of all things, like she thought the dirt would move for her. Ben had a folder under his arm, and Claire's brother, Derek, came trailing behind in a button-down and designer sunglasses, looking like a man who'd never sweat a day in his life. I led them into the kitchen. Reggie sat at the table, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Ben raised his eyebrows. Didn't know we'd have company. I like witnesses, I said simply. Claire's eyes darted to the old photographs still hung on the walls, Jack with his hand on a newborn calf, me on horseback, smiling like a fool. Ben, age 7, holding a muddy chicken like it was made of gold. Claire turned away. Ben opened the folder. Mom, we've talked it over, and here's what we're proposing. It's a win-win. You keep the house and a small portion of land, enough for your comfort. The rest goes into the LLC. Claire and I will manage it with Derek's help, Reggie snorted. Manage? That's a good word for gutting something. Derek raised a hand. Look, Mrs. Walker, no one's trying to take anything from you. This is about legacy, about maximizing what your husband left behind. He left this behind, I said, sweeping a hand toward the window. Not spreadsheets. Ben's tone shifted. Mom, be reasonable. You can't keep running this place forever. You're not 20. No, I'm not. I stood up, slow and deliberate. But I'm not dead either. Ben flinched. Reggie stood too. Let me say something here. He jabbed a finger at Derek. I remember when this woman had to bury her husband and run this place alone. I remember her feeding livestock through snow so deep we couldn't open our gates. And not once did she ask for help, so don't come in here with your folders and your marketing plans, talking like you know what legacy is. Derek cleared his throat, uncomfortable. We're not the enemy here. Maybe not, I said, but you're not family either. Ben looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it, a flicker of something real. Shame, maybe, or regret. It passed quickly. So you're saying no? I walked over to the cupboard and pulled out the envelope. The deed. I laid it on the table. Then I pulled out the second document, the trust. The one I'd finalized with my lawyer. The one that locked the ranch into a preservation clause. No sale, no development, not without fulfilling the terms Jack and I agreed on long ago. I slid it across the table. This ranch is now protected. If you want a piece of it, Ben, you'll need to live here, work here, learn the land like your father did. Claire's mouth dropped open. You're joking. No, I said. I'm finally not. Ben stared at the trust. His fingers twitched. You'd really freeze us out? He whispered. Your own son? I walked over and touched his face, gently. I'm not freezing you out. I'm offering you a way in, but you have to want it. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Claire stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. This is a waste of time. She walked out, heels clicking like gunshots on the porch. Derek followed. No goodbye. Ben stayed seated. I poured coffee. We didn't speak for a long time, just sat in the hush of the kitchen, with Reggie watching like a hawk, and Ben didn't leave that night. He said he was just too tired to drive back, but I saw it in his eyes. Something had shaken loose inside him. He stayed in his old room, the one I hadn't touched since he left for college, still full of dusty baseball trophies and worn-out posters curling at the corners. I heard him walking the floor long past midnight. In the morning, I found him outside by the paddock, watching the horses. His shirt was wrinkled, and he hadn't shaved. "You remember their names?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "That one's Lily, and the big one, he used to nibble my shoulder when I cleaned his hooves. Bucky." "Right." He smiled, faint. "God, I haven't thought about him in years." We stood there for a while, no talk of trusts or LLCs, just the creak of the fence and the breath of the animals. "I was awful yesterday," Ben said finally. "I sounded like a stranger in my own childhood." "You sounded like a man who forgot where he came from." He winced. "I thought I was helping. Claire, she's got a way of making everything sound like a good idea." I didn't respond to that. I just let the silence stretch between us. He kicked a pebble with the toe of his boot. "I used to love this place." "You still can." He looked at me then, really looked. "You'd let me back in, even after all this?" I studied his face. Older now, sharper, but the boy was still in there somewhere. The one who used to bring me frogs in his shirt pocket and cry when we had to let them go. "This place isn't about punishment, Ben. It's about remembering." He turned toward the house. "Claire's not going to like this." "I know." He nodded. "And you're okay with that?" "I'm not married to Claire." That got a laugh out of him, a real one, not the plastic kind. We spent the day walking the fields. I showed him the new repairs Reggie helped with last year, pointed out where the coyotes had dug under the fence, warned him about the bees in the west barn. He listened. He asked questions. He even fixed a bent gate hinge without being told. At sunset, we sat on the porch with sweet tea and watched the sky bleed out in color. "Dad would have hated solar cabins," he said. "Oh, he would have burned the plans." We laughed together, really laughed. It had been a long time. Then, after a long pause, Ben said something I hadn't expected. "I want to stay for a bit, just a week or two, help you out, get to know it again." I looked at him, and all I saw was Jack, standing there in our boy's skin. "You're welcome," I said, "but don't stay for me. Stay for you." He nodded. I knew Claire wouldn't like it. I knew there'd be calls, texts, maybe even ultimatums. But for the first time in years, Ben was here, not in body, in soul. And that ranch, our ranch, it was waking up again. The next morning, I found him fixing the front step with one of Jack's old hammers. He looked up and said, "Hey, Ma, where's the seed for the back field?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. Because sometimes the real inheritance isn't a deed or a dollar. It's a hand on the land, a breath in the wind, a second chance.